Hello everyone, I am here at the burial site of Vice President Richard Mentor Johnson in Frankfort, Kentucky. But I'm not alone today. I am joined with none other than the legend himself, Commander Kenneth Huber of the Southwest Ohio VFW Memorial Team.
Good to see you, sir. Always a pleasure, sir.
Yes, indeed. So we are going to be giving you an overview of Richard Mentor Johnson's life, as a lot of people don't really know much about him. He was one of the more interesting figures in American history, especially for his time in the early 19th century. A lot of people don't talk about him. And we're also going to be, of course, screaming his name for smash at the end of it. So, Kenneth, is there anything you'd like to say before we get started?
No, I'm ready. Let's learn about Vice President Johnson. One of three vice presidents named Johnson.
He is, and the only one who didn't become president. Rip. All right, let's go, guys. All right, so it is hot out right now. Richard Mentor Johnson was born in 1780 in a settlement just outside of current-day Louisville, Kentucky. Now, what you got to realize is at this time, Kentucky was the freaking frontier at this point. Kentucky was actually still part of Virginia. It wasn't even a state yet, and he was born during the Revolutionary War. In 1783, his father, Robert Johnson, moved the family to a new settlement called Great Crossing, which is near Georgetown today. His family was very prominent. His father had served in the Virginia House of Burgesses, fought in the Revolution, and helped draft Kentucky's first constitution, so he was pretty influential there. Johnson had three brothers who also served in public office. Two served in the House of Representatives, and one of them was a federal district judge in Arkansas in the 1830s. And Richard Mentor Johnson, obviously vice president. Johnson attended college at Transylvania University, which at the time was one of the most prestigious colleges west of the Appalachian Mountains. He was admitted to the bar in 1802, but he was really a career politician because 2 years later he was elected to the Kentucky State Legislature, and then 2 years after that to the House of Representatives in 1807. While he was in the House, he became very popular for some of the things that he advocated for and worked his efforts. He worked to end imprisonment for debt within the country, especially amongst military people and disabled, and also fought to ensure veteran pensions for the Revolutionary War veterans, because it's the 1800s now. The Revolutionary War veterans are starting to get older now, and so especially for people like Alexander Hamilton's widowed wife, Elizabeth, who, let's just take a minute here. She lived to be 97 years old and died 1854. I just thought that was crazy when I did research on that. But people like that, for orphans and widows and things like that, he helped to work for. When Madison took office, he was a staunch proponent of the War of 1812 and advocated for the invasion of Canada at the beginning of that war, and actually left the House at the time to serve and command an army as a colonel during the War of 1812, where he gained nationwide recognition. He fought at the Battle of Thames in 1813, the famous battle which killed Tecumseh. As you can see here on the grave, it's depicted of him killing Tecumseh, which we'll show you guys that a little bit later. Now, it's not 100% confirmed if he actually did kill Tecumseh or not, because that is a claim that he made later on. But after that, he was actually wounded at the Battle of Thames as well, and ended up coming back to the state legislature first in 1819, and then he was elected to the Senate. While in the Senate, he chaired many committees for foreign relations, for the military, and things like that. There was also a controversial bill that he helped pass, the Compensation Act, which raised the salary of congressmen, but that act was vetoed by Madison. Also, he also created many institutions of higher education, such as George Washington University now, and established a school in Kentucky, the Choctaw Academy, allowing to educate Native American children. Also, at this point, he served in the Senate until 1829, until he couldn't get reelected again. And around this time as well, news came out about his relationship that he was having with his slave, Julia Chin, I believe was her name. They actually had two children together, and she was originally his father's slave. And he was not private about his relationship like most other figures were at this point, like Thomas Jefferson, for example. No, Johnson was very outspoken about it, which a lot of people, especially out here in Kentucky, in the South, it was very unpopular. Not only that, but it was illegal to marry. So he didn't officially get married, but by law. But he did have a relationship with her and everything like that. So that kind of made him more controversial as he got up the ranks. He lost his bid for the Senate in 1829, ended up going back to the House in the 1830s until he really rises to prominence to the second highest office in the land, which I'm going to allow Mr. Huber here to continue the story with the election of 1836.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing me out on the hottest day of the year.
Yeah, sure is.
It's 92 degrees.
I'm sweating.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the election of 1836. It was a very funny election. Martin Van Buren was the current vice president of Andrew Jackson's. Andrew Jackson supported Van Buren was his hand-picked successor. So he supported him. He also supported Johnson to be vice president of the United States, to run on the ticket. And they did, but like Trenton mentioned, his past kept coming up with his relationship with the slave. So the fact that he was in a relationship with a slave openly and actually considered her his wife, that torqued off everyone in the South. In the North, he wasn't very popular because he was a slave owner. So he was kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation. So he, at the nominating convention in 1836, he actually barely made it. So he was nominated as vice president. Sorry, that happens. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about his vice presidency. There's not a tremendous lot to talk about because we've covered this before in videos. The vice presidency was pretty much a non-entity. There is no historical documents at all that it says or confirms that Van Buren conferred with the vice president at all, which is very much believable. He did break 14 ties in the Senate. We all know the vice president is the president of the Senate, but can only vote if there's a tie. He broke 14 ties, but he never went on record as to why he was voting like that, which was kind of uncommon. Almost all his predecessors had said, I'm going to vote. They almost always voted with the administration, but they would say, give a little speech as to why they voted that way. He never did. All 14, he just voted, and that was that. I want to go back to the election. He was the only vice president that was not elected by popular vote. He was elected actually by the Senate. And the reason that happened was Virginia, who was no fan of Johnson's, actually withheld their votes in the Electoral College. They were called unfaithful electors. And he was not elected outright by the people. It went to the Senate, and he was elected on the first ballot to be vice president. So he took over as vice president. Now let's skip ahead to the election of 1840, where he and Martin Van Buren are running for re-election. Well, as fate would have it, the panic, they called them panics back then, we call them depressions now, or recessions, but the panic of 1837 happened almost immediately when they both took office. So they were fairly unpopular. The reason Johnson was on the ticket is because he was for the common man, as Trenton talked about. He helped do away with debtors' prisons and the like. So, and Van Buren, although he came from somewhat humble beginnings, was always looked at as being kind of a dandy, so they kind of balance out. That's what the vice president's role was, and really is today, is to get the ticket elected, to help balance the ticket. So in 1840, they knew they were going to have a really tough election. They did. At the nominating convention this time, the convention would not renominate Johnson as vice president. So Martin Van Buren actually ran for re-election without a vice president on the ticket. And as far as I know, I'm pretty certain, Trent and I talked about it, that's the only time in American history that's happened. But Johnson campaigned as if he was the nominee. So he campaigned throughout and actually got some electoral votes. But ultimately, they would both lose the election to William Henry Harrison, who they had run against 4 years prior in 1836. The Whigs were determined that they wanted to win the White House, and they actually ran in 1836. They ran 4 Whigs for president, and to try to throw it to the House of Representatives, but they were unsuccessful, but they came very close. All right, the noise has passed. So we'll talk about now his post-vice presidency. Again, kind of interesting. He went back from the vice presidency. As Trenton said, he was in Congress, in the House of Representatives. He'd been to the Senate. He'd been vice president. Now, I guess most people would consider he stepped down to be in the Kentucky state legislature, Kentucky's House of Representatives. He served there a couple of terms, left that position, always kind of thought maybe he could run for president again, or he could run for, vice president again, or maybe even run for president. He always had that in the back of his mind, like most politicians do. That's not hard to believe. He ran for governor briefly, governor of Kentucky. Unsuccessful at that. He actually withdrew from the election because he knew he had no choice. Little footnote of history, the cemetery that we're in, Frankfort Cemetery, also holds the grave of Daniel Boone. Daniel Boone died in Missouri, but he was brought back to Kentucky in 1845, and the former vice president served as one of his pallbearers. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
And his Boone's grave is just a few hundred yards away. So anyway, he is not very successful. He's kind of frustrated. At this point, his health is starting to fail. He's elected to the Kentucky House of Representatives, and he falls ill. There's actually a horrible newspaper article written about him that say he's basically mentally and physically falling apart. He's elected in 1850 to the state of Kentucky House of Representatives, and he dies 2 weeks later at the age of 70. So I think that pretty much sums up Vice President Johnson. I think we have one other thing to do.
We do. Let's go. Oh, let's make us a good one. He deserves it.
He does.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Richard Mentor Johnson for Smash! Woo! So here is, we're overlooking the Kentucky River back here. This cemetery is in a beautiful location. This is the burial site of Daniel Boone here. They moved his body here, like we said. He was originally in Missouri in 1845. And built Fort Boonesboro in 1775, directed defense Fort 1778, immigrated to Missouri 1799, and reinterred with his wife Rebecca in Frankfort Cemetery in 1845. So this is his grave right here. We got Commander Huber right here. That is actually also the Kentucky State Capitol back there. It's currently undergoing renovation on the dome right there, unfortunately.
Here from Missouri, as Trenton said, and I don't want to ruin the mood here, but they actually might not have Daniel Boone here. Missouri claims that they moved the wrong body, and there's been debate over that ever since. So perhaps Daniel Boone rests here, perhaps he doesn't. But that doesn't really matter. What he's known for, and I'm going to talk about this pretty extensively in the next video, he was a pioneer. He opened up the frontier, and there's nothing more important than that. He found the Cumberland Gap, came to Kentucky, one of the first settlers to the move west. And we'll talk a little bit even about Manifest Destiny.
Very cool. All right, and also, we mentioned before, Vice President Johnson was pallbearer when they moved the supposed body back here, so that's really cool. We got a Revolutionary Patriot badge here. There's Daniel Boone. We got some stuff, some designs on the grave here. Beautiful day out here. It's hot, but it's beautiful. Nice summer day. There's Rebecca Boone. There's him fighting against Blackfish. I don't know if that's Chief Blackfish. I don't know. That's some Native American. He fought a lot of Native Americans.
And we don't really know if this is a family plot, but there are some named Boone on some of these headstones around here, so
yeah,
I would assume that they're related to him, but we don't really know that.
All right, guys, so that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Whack!